log into today's session and we'll get started momentarily. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome to WITA. We have a great event today, and in a way, it's a preview for WITA's annual dinner that is coming up in a couple of weeks. We will be honoring one of the congressional leaders on AGOA renewal, Senator Chris Coons. He'll be joined on the WITA stage that night by Congressman Darren LaHood, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, former Ways and Means Chairman Kevin Brady, and former United States Trade Representative Senator Rob Portman. The dinner is sold out, but if you want to join the fun in DC on July 24th, we still have some reception-only tickets available on our website, www.wita.org. You can also find information there about our big event at the WTO Public Forum in Geneva, Switzerland, where WITA International will be honoring the Director General of the WTO, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Please let us know if you plan to be in Geneva for the public forum, and we can add you to the invitation list for the event. As you know, if you've joined us on any of our webinars in the past, we like to call out the names of some of those you're in community with on Zoom, even if you can't see them on screen. So welcome today to Mohammed Chana at the Embassy of Pakistan, Nolan Johnson in the Office of Representative Adrian Smith of Nebraska, and two old friends with long histories on AGOA, Claude Fontaine, who worked with Congressman Jim McDermott on the original legislation to create AGOA, and Rosa Whitaker, who served as the first Assistant U.S. Trade Representative for Africa, where she led implementation of the original AGOA. So welcome, Mohammed, Nolan, Claude, and Rosa, and welcome to all of you. If you're watching this on Zoom, you can ask questions of our panel on Zoom using the Q&A tab. You should have also received a copy of today's event program by email, and that email contains a link to see our panelists' biographies. We have a terrific panel today, and we're pleased to welcome two new guests to the WITA webinar platform and three WITA veterans. Welcome today to Fernando Capellan, the President and CEO of Grupo M and Codevi, Wunmi Oshalaki, Deputy Director of the Global Shea Alliance, and a welcome back to Beth Hughes, the Vice President for Trade and Customs Policy at the American Apparel and Footwear Association, Ed Gresser, Vice President and Director for Trade and Global Markets at the Progressive Policy Institute and a member of WITA's Board of Directors, and our moderator, Nicole Bivens-Collinson, the Managing Principal of the Operating Committee for International Trade and Government Relations and the Practice Leader at Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg, and also a member of WITA's Board of Directors. Welcome, Fernando, Wunmi, Beth, Ed, and Nicole.
Great. Thanks so much, Ken. And thank you, everyone, for joining us, and also especially to my panelists. We've got a great group of trade experts and practitioners that have direct experience in these different programs that we're going to talk about to help us look at the various ways, where the status is, what the impact is on some of the programs that have either lapsed or are going to lapse in September of 2025. So, you know, one of the things that I've seen is it's clear that the Biden administration is not undertaking any new trade negotiations. You know, one of my colleagues remarked, and I'm now going to adopt this, is that we always thought that the T in USTR stood for trade, but now it appears that it stands for talk. So we have the United States talk representative because we're having lots and lots and lots of talks, but we're not seeing any trade. But given that background, and in the absence of an administrative push, Congress also has the ability to pass, extend, or create trade programs. And, you know, we've seen so far that they have only talked about trade issues as well. They allowed the Generalized System of Preferences to expire on December 31st, 2020. So at first, I want to turn to you. Can you tell us a little bit about what the GSP program is and how its expiration has impacted other trade options?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And thanks to WITA for having me on. GSP, which I used to oversee in my previous role at USTR, is the oldest and largest U.S. trade preference program, which is a partial tariff waiver for smaller and poorer countries. It dates to 1974, and as of its lapse, enrolled 119 countries and territories. These range from quite small Pacific islands to very large trading partners such as Brazil or Ukraine or Indonesia and so forth. It covered about $20 billion in imports a year, a lot of jewelry, a lot of building stones, suitcases, flowers, and which was about 0.6% of US imports and about 10% of imports from the GSP countries. To get the benefits, countries need to meet 15 eligibility criteria. These range from anti-terrorism to labor standards, intellectual property rights, and other topics. The US, among developed countries, is now the only country without such a system. From my perspective, I would cite three impacts, which I think are pretty negative. First, there's been some shift of trade from the GSP beneficiaries to non-beneficiaries, which, depending on the product, could be China, could be the EU or FTA partners or others. One example is canned tuna from the Solomon Islands, a very small Pacific Island country. We were buying about 500 tons a year under GSP, which is a least developed country product. This stopped immediately when the GSP lapsed and the imports have shifted to Southeast Asian countries. Second, there's been some specific policy effects in terms of things we were doing that have stopped. In particular, all reviews of benefits are frozen. There were 7 reviews of benefits ongoing, 4 for labor, 2 for IP, and 1 for arbitral awards. All of those have been frozen for 4 years with no progress, and obviously no new ones have been opened. These, in some cases, but though not all, have good outcomes. For example, ones that I worked on were labor law reform in Georgia, market access and digital policy in Indonesia, and support for abolition of forced labor in Uzbekistan. And then a third effect is a kind of larger one, which I will give a couple of examples of. The Biden administration early on wanted to have a very ambitious trade and labor policy, which, whenever one's viewed that, has had to be sharply scaled back because GSP was one of the major tools for this topic. From another perspective, the administration did an important and I think quite useful review of Pacific Islands policy in 2021 and 2022. Trade with these countries is small for us, but large for them, and loss of GSP has hurt them a bit. China comes with a lot of aid and a lot of offers. So some of the tools that the US can use, in these larger policy questions are off the table. So I think the expiration and lapse of GSP has not been a positive thing.
Thanks, Ed. I think it's a good opening for us to get an assessment of what the impact is whenever one of these programs expires. And so, Beth, building on what Ed has shared with us, can you tell us how the expiration has impacted companies that are members of the American Apparel and Footwear Association, and what would its renewal mean for them?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole, and thanks for WITA for having me today. For my members that produce travel goods in these GSP countries, first and foremost, millions are owed in refunds since the program lapsed 43 months ago. So that's a lot of money, right? It's billions of dollars owed across all the industries that use GSP. But for my members, they're trying to get out of China. They're trying to diversify their supply chains. They've been doing this for years now, and you can see it in the trade data where some of that trade, unfortunately, is going back to China or to other non-GSP countries because of this lack of confidence in Congress right now to do what they've always done, which is, there's been lapses in GSP before, but not this long, right? And so that uncertainty in the program and the future of the program and how much, companies can rely on this program to source from some of these countries and really move away from China, they're questioning that right now. And I think they're going to continue to question that. And as we'll get into later in the program, that kind of rubs off on some of the other trade preference programs that still need to be renewed, like you mentioned, next year.
Right. So, we can clearly see how this is impacting specifically companies. Ed shared with us how it's really impacting countries as well. It is a program that, over the years has seen some of the trade more evenly distributed throughout the globe. And also, part of the Biden administration's focus has been on getting more countries working with the small and medium enterprises, worker-centric. Well, most of those are located in some of these developing countries and in some of these smaller Pacific Islands, as I've mentioned. So, we're seeing that what the talk is about what they want to have done versus what we're actually seeing done is an issue. And granted, the administration is not the one that can pass the legislation, but they can definitely push to try to get it moving forward. and looking at the, what kind of bills might be moving forward. Maybe Ed and Beth, you can each talk a little bit about the bill that was passed through the House Ways and Means Committee. It was HR 7986. It was introduced by the subcommittee chairman, Adrian Smith. And looking at that bill, do you think it does enough with respect to updating the eligibility criteria? Or what are your thoughts on the eligibility criteria? We'll talk about that first, and then there's some other aspects I want to talk about too. I don't know, maybe Ed, do you want to take that first?
Sure. I guess before turning to criteria, I think there's a lot of good things to say about Chairman Smith's work on this. The bill has a long renewal. It has restoration of the back payments. I think he has worked hard to try to address a lot of the members' concerns. In terms of the criteria, I think there is some risk of having too many. When I was overseeing the program, there were 4 that were very active criteria. There's labor, there was IP, there was arbitral awards, there was market access. And with that limited set of top tier things, countries kind of knew what they needed to do. If we're adding in kind of pretty broad foreign policy and tech policy and rights, it's going to be harder to say objectively which countries are compliant with all the criteria. So I have some concern about the length of the new list of criteria, but I do think the most important thing is to get the program back online, and the professional staff at USTR is quite good, and they can make it work.
Great, thanks. Beth, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with Ed. There's we don't want to have too many sticks and not enough carrots. We want to make this program usable and sustainable, not just for my members, but also for the countries that are participating in the program. And so we want to make sure that we don't have too much that they can it makes it harder for them, or they just drop out and don't even use the program. We want to make sure that there is incentives for these governments to abide by those eligibility criteria and make it work so that we can use it and get those tariff, benefits. Those retroactive refunds are critical, like I mentioned earlier. Some of the rules of origin are a little concerning in the bill that was passed through Ways and Means, but we'll kind of see how it shakes out in the end.
And with respect to the rule of origin change that you just alluded to, one of the things that bill will do is increase. Currently, the rule of origin requires that 35% of the value of the product be in the country of that is claiming the benefits, whatever the beneficiary country is. 15% of that 35%, however, could be U.S. content. So it helps count towards meeting that 35% goal. And the bill would ratchet up over time that RVC, the regional value content level, from 35% to 50% by 2031. And you just talked a little bit about that. Can you give us any other ideas on what you think what this would do, number one, for the countries, and how this would impact the trade?
Well, I think we all know that no one has a completely vertical supply chain like China does. And so when we ratchet up that RVC, I think it's going to be even more difficult, and it could have some problems. We've shared it with our members, and nothing is popping out just yet, but kind of the devil's in the details, right? And so we want to make sure that I think maybe my observation would be, or my recommendation would be, perhaps, as we ratchet up to that 40%, kind of see, I think there's an ITC study that's supposed to happen, see how that kind of, maybe do that first and see how that plays out, to see if this is even possible for some of these goods. For travel goods, maybe. For other industries, I'm not sure if they'll be able to get up to that full 50%, even with that, phase in time. So it's a little concerning. And we just want to make sure that we're not doing anything that pulls people away from these GSP countries and pushes them back to China or elsewhere.
I kind of agree on that. One of the things, I'm sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Add one quick thought to that. GSP countries are a very large range of development. They come from very poor, very in landlocked countries to the Brazils and Indonesias of the world. The poorer ones, the smaller ones, will have somewhat of a harder time matching higher RBCs than others. So I would hope there would be some thought about how to deal with LDCs, how to deal with small island countries, because they're the ones that are going to be least able to meet a higher, more demanding rule.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And one of the things that surprised me was they ratcheted up the RVC, but they didn't provide a commensurate ratcheting up of US input, which to me would seem to make sense to help you to build greater ties between the countries. And to, if you got to get up to 50% now, if you could do 25% US, that really builds in this trade link. So let's move on now. I mean, GSP is the base on which the AGOA is built. And while AGOA has not yet expired, it's going to expire in September of 2025. And we've seen already that the US Congress does not have a good track record in trying to extend or maintain preference programs. GSP has been expired for almost 4 years. We don't want to see that happen with the AGOA. So I'm going to turn now to Wunmi. If you can tell me sort of, we haven't seen an AGOA bill really move through the House or Senate committee. We've seen some bills introduced in the Senate. And one of those bills would extend the AGOA for 20 years, another would extend it for 16 years. Do you see the changes in the GSP eligibility as potentially a barrier if they were to mimic those in the sub-Saharan African countries?
Yeah, and I think we've just really started having this conversation to the point that Ed just raised, is the fact that, you need to consider this sub-Saharan African countries and where they are at this point. When you think about some of the GSP eligibility criteria that have been introduced, some of them do have the potential of improving production standards within Sub-Saharan Africa. Some of them have the opportunities to even improve market access, but then you would see that a significant amount of this eligibility criteria could also have some compliance cost implication related to that. And the question is, can this countries really meet those cost of compliance? So when we stay on the topic of the value add requirement, so going from 35% to about 50% by 2031, that in itself could pose a significant challenge to a lot of companies trying to meet that in the immediate term. I think that there needs to be some consideration on how these countries and some of the companies operating in these countries would be able to comply with this requirement. But nonetheless, when you look at the other side of the conversation, is that a lot of this could also attract foreign direct investment into these countries and hopefully create more jobs. So that's a positive on that side when you think about the long-term effect of really improving local value addition. So I work in the shea sector, for example, where in the past, you only see a lot of export of raw materials out of from the ag sector out of Africa. But an introduction of value addition was seeing that even the export coming out of Africa would be more higher valued export. When you also think about other eligibility criteria, including things like violation of recognized human rights in beneficiary countries, or even economic policies to reduce poverty, increase availability of healthcare and educational opportunities, I think this also signals to these countries that there's a need for them to actually do more. On the violation of human rights in beneficiary countries, I think one of the things we need to look at is the consumer demands. Consumers are more interested in sustainable products that are produced within like responsible supply chain. You see this particular eligibility criteria also aligns very much with the EU CSRD, for example. So there is the potential for that to improve market standards, for example, and make make products coming out of sub-Saharan African countries under AGOA more aligned with what consumers are interested in the US. When I talk about the economic policy, for example, on reducing poverty, I think this aligns with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and this is something that all these countries are striving to. So there's an opportunity to actually improve what the countries are doing with some of these GSP eligibility criteria. But on the other hand, we also need to understand some of the cost implications. So for the first time, we're also seeing the first ever GSP agricultural eligibility criteria, which would impact the shea sector, which I have spent the last couple of years working in. So when you think about criteria that relates to adoption of science-based standards, for example, or including biotechnology, that in itself might not be something that the companies can scale up to very relatively quickly. You also see criteria around removing subsidies, agricultural subsidies. And I think that in itself could have a potential impact on negatively really impact local farmers that really rely on government support. So, and when you think about the long-term effect of that, we're talking about impact on food security within these countries. So definitely we need to start looking at some of this GSP eligibility criteria that have been introduced and understand how this could potentially impact the AGOA policy if some of these criteria are being mimicked. I think, and I'm just going to pivot back to Ed's point, is the fact that you really need to consider the different countries and how they can address or meet this criteria and really fine-tune them to fit. So it's not like, you know, a one-size-fits-all, but it really should be tailored to the different countries as well.
I think your points are really valid, and it does build on what Ed was saying with respect to we've got to take into account the level of development of the countries, the size of the countries, the economies that are there, and you know, maybe that's something we need to look at a little bit differently. And we have looked at the sub-Saharan African countries differently than the GSP. You know, they have more products that are eligible. They have different rules. Apparel, for example, is eligible to be manufactured there. But you know, one of the things that we've seen a lot is criticism of the AGOA program for the supposed or apparent limitations that it has with respect to the diversity of goods that are being used and are being imported into the United States, being manufactured in the African countries and brought to the United States, as well as to the various number of countries that are participating. What do you think is that a valid criticism, number one? And number two, what do you think that the new AGOA renewal could do to maybe help address some of that?
Absolutely. You know, I do acknowledge some of the concerns that have been raised by people who expect that AGOA should have delivered more, and that, you know, people that have argued for broader participation and wider range of imports. One thing that's clear is that AGOA has worked well for some sectors. So sectors that have been able to understand how to use it, able to connect with American importers, have really thrived on it. But when you see the general sentiment around why it hasn't worked, you would hear people often say that there's a lack of awareness about the program, or there's challenges in getting trade finances, for example, particularly for small enterprises. You also have sentiment around lack of difficulties in making the right connection with US buyers or partners within the US. So these are valid sentiments. However, it's also important to remember that AGOA has really provided significant benefits to African countries, sub-Saharan African countries. Some data point that I was looking at before shows that in 2022 alone, AGOA beneficiaries exported about 30 billion worth of goods to the US. So that's something that we really should be proud of. It's some success there, and I think that should not be overshadowed. However, there are success stories that have come out. You see Kenya and Ethiopia that have successfully utilized AGOA to boost textile. And these success stories can actually be replicated into other sectors. And I'm going to reference the shea sector, for example. The shea industry in itself can benefit significantly from broader access to the US. And that in itself can foster a lot of economic empowerment for rural women who depend on it. You have about 60 million women in that regard. It could create thousands of jobs for youth as well. But you also need to understand the complexities as to why it's not being utilized that well. So the biggest use of shea, for example, is in chocolate, so as a CBE. However, in the US, you cannot use chocolate as a CBE at this point because you have a standard of identity that prohibits you from doing that. So on one end, you have AGOA that's trying to improve trade relations between US and sub-Saharan Africa. On the other hand, you have some other limitations that needs to be addressed to be able to better open the market. But that said, there are certain things that we're doing as well, looking for other opportunities to improve the market access. So there is the generally recognized as safe regulation that the FDA has, where that allows, the use of shea in other things outside of chocolate. And one of the things that we've seen is as far back as of 2020, when the US liberalized the use of shea olein in a number of food products, what happened there was an increased export of shea from producing countries directly into the US. So the data point from 2020 to 2021 showed a 130% increase in export just as a virtue of that. So those are kind of things that we need to understand. I think, as we try to make AGOA more effective, we need a more comprehensive strategy, is what I would say. One that integrates the different elements of trade. So you're looking at the supply side and you're looking at the demand side as well. And you're also linking, and I'll speak a lot about the ag sector because that's where I'm focused. So you also need to think about, how we will provide the right technical assistance to the small companies, looking at companies that are trying to strengthen their supply chain. How do we better integrate the AGOA into other US government initiatives like some of the USAID grant programs? And I think that is where we need to focus. With the small companies, SMEs, how do we provide them the right technical assistance to be able to use, effectively use AGOA? I was talking to a few members, actually 3 members a couple of days ago, 2 who have been effectively utilizing AGOA. They don't pay any tariffs on their shea product. And 1 continues to pay tariffs on their shea product. And that was due to lack of awareness and lack of the capacity to be able to leverage it. So a lot of it is really to make sure that, we're coherent in the way that we are putting together this policies and also different programs that are supporting the effectiveness of it.
That's great. I know one of the things that I frequently get frustrated by is the comments that, there is a lack of participation, a lack of variety. But I think one of the things that our trade statistics don't reflect is that there is a good amount of integration, continental integration, under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. There are a lot of countries who are trading amongst themselves, and they may be putting together products. For example, you're seeing a lot of automobiles coming in from South Africa. Well, feeding into those automobiles could be leather that has been tanned in Eswatini that is on the hides of cattle that may have been raised in Namibia. So you're not seeing that benefit is coming, it's coming in through showing up as South Africa and showing up as an automobile, but actually it is part of the leather and the whole it goes from agriculture into processing and industrialization of industrialized product into an automobile. So I think there's some challenges in the way we look at some of that. But given the fact that as I said, it's not yet expired. GSP has already expired. We heard about what that complications have been and the repercussions from that. But are you seeing or do you have any sense of any repercussions that may be being felt right now by companies or investors in sub-Saharan African countries as a result of the inaction by the US Congress?
Absolutely. I think, in this type of economic environment, a lot of investors, companies need more stable business, atmosphere. So when Congress is signaling an inaction for them, that's really to say that, okay, where should we halt an investment? What's going to happen next? I know Beth was talking about, on the GSP, how much is being owed in refund. This is money out of a company's pocket. This is cash outflow that they could actually be putting back into their business to operate. And when you think about Sub-Saharan Africa, I want to focus on small companies as well. This becomes very significant cash flow that they cannot recover and they cannot use to expand their operations. So yes, I think it makes a lot of companies nervous to see what's going to happen. I think that a lot of businesses rely on this preferential trade terms to remain competitive in the US market. I think, manufacturing things in Africa has its own complexity in itself. So to become more competitive, I think they really need this tariff breaks that AGOA affords them. So really, as Sub-Saharan Africa is growing, we don't want to deter future investments or stifle the growth. And if we do that, it becomes a bit more challenging for them to recover. So you want to see what even happened with the COVID pandemic and how long it's taking some of these African countries to recover. For investors themselves, it's just unpredictable. So they would hold off on investing or injecting more FDIs into the country. And I do also say this, like you also need to understand the indirect effect of this, which would be a lot of, youth migrating out of Africa. And I said this to one of my colleagues. I said, you want to curb migration into the US, then pass the bill, because the bill allows people to get jobs, high-skilled jobs, and they would stay within the country if they're able to feed themselves, get decent living. So, I think we need to, these dialogues are important, and I'm glad that WITA is doing this. I think Congress needs to be able to understand, how this impacts livelihoods, and do something to address it relatively quickly to make the environment more stable for people to do business.
Right, and then I know, Beth, a lot of apparel, Mumi mentioned it, that some of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa have really taken off in the apparel industry. So how is that impacting some of your members?
Yeah, definitely. I think, the continent is a logical place for folks to go to and source from if they're trying to diversify their supply chains. The tariff benefits, along with the state-of-the-art, rules of origin, the flexibilities there, the third country fabric provision in particular, is really critical. And as we are approaching that September 2025 deadline, apparel companies may do their orders 12, 18 months in advance. And so they're getting a little nervous. And that inaction on GSP is really making them even more uncertain of how, if this program will be renewed and if there are going to be any changes or reforms to it, because for our sector, we're killing it. We are just, we are the case study in the ITC report that was the success story, and there are others too, but we really don't want to lose this opportunity for a long-term renewal, for keeping those, apparel rules of origin in place at least for another 10 years. The, ROI on investments is at least that long, and so if we don't get another long-term renewal, I think you'll start to see folks kind of shift away and out. Like you mentioned at the top of the hour, Nicole, we're not doing any trade agreements, even with Kenya, who we were gearing up for a few years ago. And so if we're not doing that, AGOA is critical. And it's critical, like when we mentioned, for the relationship between the United States and sub-Saharan Africa. Our members are seeing and starting to think about next year already and a couple of years down the line. And if we want to attract more apparel brands to the continent, we need this long-term renewal, because they do make their orders and they do need that time to train, skill workers, find those vendors and suppliers. All that takes time, and there's a lot that goes into that, and they really need to have that opportunity, that timing and the AGOA renewal to secure any future orders and place their business there.
And having an early signal is definitely important. And so just quickly, Ed, looking at some of the data, I mentioned about how you might have one product that comes out of South Africa as an automobile, but it doesn't really show what's in there. Do you think there's any way that we could improve that sort of data type collection, number one? And number two, as Beth and Wumi were just saying, have we seen any changes in the data flow so far, because we are getting closer and closer to the expiration of the agreement, and we're seeing that impacting what's actually happening in fact?
That's a really good kind of complex question, I think. In terms of, can we understand the supply chains and where South Africa might be getting its auto parts and leather from? Yes, we can do that. We have to do it largely through consultation with South African experts. And we can do that on a fairly large scale. We have very good statistical people here, and they can help to educate the policymakers in Congress, and the ITC can help. That raises a kind of bigger question that I've been thinking about vis-a-vis AGOA, that we do focus a lot on the tariff benefit it provides, which is a core part of the program and very important. There are also a couple of other big benefits that I think are kind of taken for granted. One is that AGOA, in contrast to GSP and also in contrast to the Caribbean Basin Initiative, has a very powerful convening function. That every year there's a ministerial where U.S. Trade officials meet with quite a lot of African counterparts. They get to know them, and they can share ideas. Things that might not occur to us will come up there. And some of these are not related to tariffs. So just one example I was looking at earlier this year. Ethiopia is the largest supplier of birdseed to the United States. It's a zero tariff product. It almost all comes in through the Port of Baltimore. There's a big interruption there. Is there something that we can advise the Ethiopian birdseed industry to do to continue their trade? It's not a tariff issue, but it's a big part of U.S.-Ethiopian trade. There are issues that we called Frontime worked on, of adding intellectual property value to African products through branding or regional identification. This has been done for vanilla and coffee. So there are a lot of things that the convening function of AGOA does that aren't really so noticeable, but are quite important. And I do worry we'll be lost if the program lapses for a long time. And related to that, and also a question going back to the addition of criteria, the number of countries in AGOA has shrunk noticeably from 39 in 2016 to 32 now. That there are stories for each of those, and not questioning the decisions, but the original year 2000 view of AGOA was this would be a very long-term economic development program and wouldn't be so affected by year-to-year issues. And I think that's something we should keep in mind, because it's a very important part of the success of the program.
No, those are excellent points, and I'm glad you brought up the ministerials and the fact that there is something other than just the duty benefits, and you're able to address those, because we do have AGOA meetings and ministerials coming up. In fact, in Washington, D.C. later this month. I believe they're July 23rd, 24th, 25th, right around there. So there's going to be some public forums that will be held. So for those of you who are interested, there's another opportunity to potentially meet with some of these African countries, or to meet with some of the representatives and to participate. And one of the things, we've talked about GSP, which is, very, very broad. We've talked about, covers, wide scope of countries, as Ed mentioned. We talked about Sub-Saharan Africa, which is limited, again, just to the Sub-Saharan African countries. But another program that's equally important and beneficial is one that's even more limited. So it's sort of, we're going down the funnel of countries that have benefits on this, and that is the Haiti Help Program. Haiti is the only least developing country in the Western Hemisphere. And as some of you may know, there is a lot going on in Haiti that needs to be addressed. And we're very fortunate today that we have Fernando Capellan with us. And he has a manufacturing trade park that's in Haiti, and it provides meaningful jobs to 15,000 direct Haitians. And the indirect jobs on that multiply it by at least 5. It also has ties directly to additional jobs that are happening in Dominican Republic. Remember, Haiti and the DR are on the island of Hispaniola. And that even ties further into the United States, because some of the manufacturing that happens in the Dominican Republic that's used in Haiti comes from inputs that are produced here in the United States from cotton that is actually grown in the United States. So we're seeing this really long symbiotic chain, supply chain of how that, what is going on in programs and benefits that are happening in Haiti directly impact the adjacent neighboring country and the United States of workers here. Can you explain to us how the programs that Haiti has put in place have helped to grow this, and what you have done and what's going on with respect to your factories?
Thank you, WITA. Thank you, Nicole, for the opportunity. Definitely, in the last 22 years, is a unique supply chain. Is been formed. Haiti, Dominican Republic, and the United States, also including some items that comes from Central America. So the Hope Health legislation that will be due September 2025, we're just trying to see how we rush as soon as possible to renew, as our investors, our customers need to see a little bit more down the road. Right now, the program, as you well said, Nicole, is beneficial for the U.S., from cotton farmers to spinners to transportation to U.S. ports, etc. So that whole supply chain is beneficial for everybody. If any company, any brand, any apparel brand, or any shoes, light assembly wants to be in near shore in this part of the world, the place is Haiti. Right now, we've seen that many companies in Central America and in the Dominican Republic, for labor-intensive factories, are really not competing, are really suffering. And all those jobs that we lost in Haiti for the reasons that we know about the violence in the south, and all the losses, the jobs we lost because the lack of visibility on our customers, because the no renewal of Hope Health, really is going back to where the U.S. is trying to put it near to avoid, to give jobs to a country like Haiti that now is under an intervention of Kenya to restore order in Port-au-Prince area. Now this country needs jobs, because no matter what the peace comes, if the government restored authority, if people doesn't have jobs, we'll come back to the same place we are right now, or we were. So we just asking, doing all our best to see how the U.S. Congress deliver and renew this legislation for this neighbor that impact not only Dominican Republic, not only the Bahamas, not only Central America, but also U.S. with a lot of immigration, that people desperate to do something. People need to eat, and if we can give that legislation, the country lost 30,000 jobs already. Between Caracol and Codevi, we really can create those jobs back, because we have the empty buildings. We had 22,000 jobs. Now we're down to 15. Caracol is supposed to be 60,000 jobs. It's probably 4,000. The country had 65, 70,000 jobs. Now no more than 25, 28,000. And it's a country with good people ready to work, people that needs a job, to avoid that people go back to the gangs. That the big effort the U.S. government is doing with the Kenya and all this equipment, everything that is being done, need to compensate it, need to complement it with jobs.
Right, and as you said, this is another program, just like the AGOA. It also expires in September of 2025, and this is fully within the governance of the Congress to make a difference, to renew the program or extend the program. And we've seen several different bills also that have been introduced, right, so far, that would extend it, but we're not seeing the action and trying to move it forward. And so, again, it's one of those things where I think, similar to AGOA, can you share with us how the delay is really impacting what's happening in your factories or what might be happening in some of the other factories that might be in Port-au-Prince. And maybe you can describe exactly where your factories are located vis-a-vis where a lot of the turbulence and turmoil are going on in the main part of Haiti.
Yes, Codevi and Caracol, we are located in the north of the country. We are lucky that a big chain of mountains separate the north and the south. Port-au-Prince is in the south, where most of the problems are. In the capital, all the gangs, all the movement, and many factories, probably 90% of the factories shut down in Port-au-Prince, which it needs to be restored also after the. But we are lucky to be north, and Codevi is right at the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, in a Haitian town called Wanamint. What we've been doing there through these 24 years that we are working there, we've been creating an ecosystem together with the community. We go from clinic to dentist to labs to recycling plant for plastics. We go to low supermarket, 9/11 to serve both communities, clinic, the school. We have a beautiful child care center with 160 kids that the ladies that from 45 days to 6 years, they leave the kids in the nursery. You name it. I mean, we've been creating together with the community all these sports. We changing the matrix of charcoal and wood for propane gas for the community. So it's a whole ecosystem that really is suffering right now for the lack of visibility of our customers for the renovation of Hope Health. So I think the potential, I think that U.S. retailers, U.S. apparel brands should be also helping us in Washington, lobbying for the renewal, because it's for the best interest of them to have plenty of labor, plenty of nearby 2 days to Miami from the new Manzanillo port that is being built in the Dominican side, right at the border. So it's for the best interest of the U.S. brands to be in a place like the north of Haiti, in Caracol and in Codevi.
And Beth, I mean, your members in particular are impacted and involved in Haiti, I know. And as Fernando was saying, can you share with us what your companies and members are seeing, feeling, and what they're doing to try to help move the Haiti Hope build forward as well?
Yes,
Well,
Oh, go
ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
No worries, Fernando. Thank you. I echo your comments. You know, we've been working diligently to get Congress to pay attention to Haiti in a lot of different ways, just because of what's happening there, but also the trade preference program and the need to renew it now, because similar to AGOA, folks are making their orders now. They need that certainty. The apparel industry in Haiti is completely dependent on these preferences. And so we don't want the industry to collapse if they're not, because that is jobs, right? And that's all the good work that you were mentioning, Fernando, that you're doing with the helping prop up the community and keep the communities employed. A lot of those are women, and we know that, and we want to make sure that we're supporting them as well. And so I have members that are telling me that, they're supporting, one of them at least, supporting 4,000 workers. 90% of the workers show up to work every single day. So it's a clear sign that the industry is bringing that stability, that opportunity, like I said, to the majority of the workforce being female. We don't want that to be interrupted in any way. And of course, that also plays into the migration challenge that the United States is facing. And we don't want that to impact the unemployment rates to skyrocket if Haiti Help and Hope are not renewed in a timely fashion, because that's just going to put the pressure on our borders as well. And just one more point too, that I think Fernando made as well, that, proximity to the US market that Haiti has, the ability to to use accumulate between the other programs that we have, the other FTAs that we have. That's critical. That flexibility there. That makes Haiti a logical place again to do business once we get the stable government, and the gang violence down. I think we'll really see folks and apparel brands really utilizing Haiti even more. But one of the critical thing is to renew those preferences this year to send that market signal so that companies stay in the country and continue to employ all of these workers.
Can I add one quick thing here?
Please.
The apparel exports from Haiti to the U.S. typically around $1 billion a year. That's in the neighborhood of 5 to 8 to 9% of Haitian GDP. So the potential loss of this benefit is a macro issue for the economic stability of the country, as in addition to its human impact on the workers. So this is quite important.
I have to say I agree with all the points that have been made. And one of the things is, I think what we're hearing is a consistent theme that Congress has within its power to be able to do some of the trade that it complains that our U.S. talk representative is not doing. So we have an opportunity here. Congress is holding the reins for the horse, and they just need to gallop it across the finish line. And I think what we're all hoping is that they are able to, one, restore the GSP benefits, two, extend AGOA for as long as they possibly can, and three, extend at the same time the Haiti Hope Bill. We've got Congress simultaneously putting pressure on suppliers from around the world, asking them to shift their sourcing matrices. And many of those shifts would be out of Asia, and particularly out of China. But if you're doing so, recognizing that there are limitations in products that might be available, vertically integrated supply chains, we have to have some sort of preference for those other countries to get them into the game. And I think that that's what we need to really focus on. And so I'm going to throw this open to each of you and just, let me know what you think with respect to what do you think the chances are for Congress actually passing a GSP, an AGOA, a Haiti Hope Help, all three together before the end of this year, before the end of this session. So maybe I'll start with you, Ed, and see what you think.
The opportunity is there. I think from my perspective, the substantive differences on the GSP bills are not nearly so great as the damage of the loss of the program has done. I think there's a lot of support in principle for AGOA and Haiti. It's more, effort of will and putting aside small differences to achieve, significant good things. So yes, they have the opportunity, they have the time, they can do it.
Beth, what do you think?
I agree that the opportunity is there. We've seen the Senate Finance Committee and House Ways and Means have hearings. So they've done the things, they've done the roundtables, Ways and Means and has done the GSP bill already. There's Haiti bills out there. They need an AGOA bill. We've seen the AGOA bill on the Senate side, and we need the GSP and the Haiti bill. But I do think they've sent signals that they could work together if they put the politics aside and get a nice big trade package together. I think that's how we can move all of them together and put aside some of those nitpicky issues that Republicans might have or Democrats might have and really get it done if we can package them all together. And I think that's the real opportunity and the crucial work that needs to be done now through the end of the year.
Woodme, would you have any ideas on that?
Absolutely. I would echo Ed and Beth again on this. I think it's possible. I think, Congress needs to realize that it's a win-win scenario for the U.S. And for other countries benefiting either under GSP and also AGOA. I think it's setting aside the differences. And I believe that if they put, in the forefront what's important, really trade, and also, reducing some of these other foreign influences, I think we could all come together around those topics and make it happen. The little differences don't matter when you start to focus on the benefit to some of this sub-Saharan African countries from a job development perspective, from a regional stability perspective, and even food security. I think that those points should actually be at the forefront of the discussion and less of the little things that they disagree on.
Thanks. And I know it's kind of unfair, Fernando, to ask you to opine on U.S. congressional activity. So maybe I'll phrase the question a little bit differently for you. What is a few points that you would just like to make sure that our Congress knows with respect to why it is so important that that this be renewed as soon as possible and before the end of this Congress?
Yeah, something that is good to say is that in 2015, AGOA and Hope Health was renewed at the same time on the same package. So that can be done now too. I mean, this Hope Health legislation is, include all the manufacturing jobs, all the farms, etc. in the U.S., ports, like I said, transportation in the U.S. But not only, something very important, Haiti buys all their export and all the dollars that Haiti receives is buying around 80% back to the U.S. on rice, on food, on medicines back from the U.S. So the supply chain, the effect of Haiti having jobs, not only to decrease the pressure of U.S. borders, is a humanitarian situation. It's something that is a country that is in total collapse right now on the south, that needs people to stay in their country, to have jobs. They demonstrate that we can do it in Haiti very well. And I think the U.S. Congress has to react and say, guys, let's not wait any longer for something that is logical to do and will be done for sure. Maybe lame duck, I don't know, but needs to be done as soon as possible so buyers come back to Haiti. Buyers see and they can have predictability. This is urgent. This is something that cannot wait any longer. Cannot wait any longer.
Great, thank you. Ken, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, indeed, you have time for one more question.
Okay, great. One more question we got from another one from the audience. It's we kind of answered one of the questions, which was with respect to what do we think about the GSP and its chances for passing. But here's a question from Oliver Ward. It says, during a recent Senate Finance Committee hearing on GSP reauthorization, Senator Warren opposed applying GSP benefits retroactively, arguing it would provide a windfall refund to big businesses. Can you just answer whether or why retroactivity is necessary in a GSP reauthorization bill, and whether the Democrats' insistence on reauthorizing the trade adjustment assistance with GSP could pose a major obstacle to renewal? Who would like to try to answer that first?
I would just like to say, I think as far as the retroactivity piece, I think the senator fails to recognize that many of the GSP users, the U.S. businesses are small or medium sized, and they took out loans and loans year after year because they stayed in the program thinking that it would be renewed each year. And without that, so they're some folks may be shutting down soon or have shut down, but they kept going thinking that Congress would act and renew the program. And it's always been retroactive, the refunds. It just hasn't gone this long. And so that's not these businesses' fault, right? They were doing the good work of getting out of China, if that's what Congress really wanted us to do. And now they're in these GSP countries, having these loans, these extra mortgages, what have you. So I think it's unfair to just say that it's big business getting all this money back. I don't think that's actual fact.
Yeah, if I can add a little bit to that, the purpose of the GSP program, and likewise the purpose of AGOA in Haiti, is to encourage American businesses, large or small, to look at smaller and poorer countries and not entirely go to the larger and mass production, somewhat lower cost sites. And the retroactivity of these benefits, if it's not if Congress doesn't do it, that will be a big signal to the buyers, whether they're big or small, that you shouldn't bet on these programs. They may lapse, and you would be better off buying from China, buying from some other place. So I think the case of retroactivity in the core purpose of the program as a development program is a good one.
Great. I'll leave it there, Ken.
This was terrific, guys. You covered so much ground, provided so much detail. It's sort of what we pride ourselves on at WITA, where we speak to all parts of the trade community. We speak to folks who are very familiar with these issues, and we can speak to folks who don't have a lot of familiarity with these issues. And you guys covered so much, brought so much context and important information, and why this is a priority and why it's important that we had this discussion today. Very grateful to you, Nicole, for moderating the discussion. Beth, Wunmi, Fernando, and Ed, thank you all very much. Hope everybody takes care, be safe, stay cool wherever you are. And thank you all again, and we hope to see you again on the WITA webinar platform soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.